shall we? So first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for logging in today, for coming along on a very sunny day to all be sitting in front of your laptops. I think that just shows what an important area this is. And also just a huge welcome as well to Mohammed and Victoria from Latitude Law. They're going to be giving you an overview of your immigration options following graduation in just a moment. One thing to point out before I forget, we are going to record this session just so as many students as possible can have access to the information after the session. But in terms of the Q&A part of the session, we'll just be taking questions via the chat. So there's no need to worry in terms of the fact of you appearing on screen or anything like that. And obviously, if you keep your camera off as well, it will just be the speakers, the panelists who will appear on screen in that sense. So, yep, following Latitude Law's roundup of immigration options following graduation, we're then going to have Marin, who, very lucky for us, works as part of the career service now as one of our Manchester Graduate Talent interns, but is also an alumni from the University of Manchester. And Marin's going to give their perspective on what it's like to go through the visa system in the UK as an international graduate. Then, most importantly, you're going to have the chance to ask your questions, both to Marin and to Latitude Law. And then finally, I'm just going to wrap up with a bit of an overview of support from the career service, so how we can support you both while you're studying at the University of Manchester, but for 2 years, up to 2 years after you graduate as well, crucially. So without further ado, however, I'm going to pass you over to Mohammed and Victoria from Latitude Law, and they are going to take you through your immigration options following graduation. So over to you, Mohammed and Victoria.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone to join us today. My name is Victoria. I'm one of the trainee solicitors here at Latitude Law, and I'm joined by my excellent colleague, Mr. Mohammed Hafaji, who has a broad range of experience in all areas of immigration. And that's all that we do at Latitude Law. We are solely focused on immigration law. So we're happy here today to talk to you about your options following graduation. So thinking ahead to your future and what sort of things you'll be able to do. However, I wanted to start a little bit with a small focus on your work conditions as a student. So I think that most of you would be aware that your employment conditions now as a student are dependent on the type of course that you're studying. So essentially, if you're doing your full-time course at degree level with the University of Manchester, I think that most of you are aware that you're able to work part-time during term time and full-time during vacation. So your part-time prohibition will be up to 20 hours a week. There are other conditions that are in place depending on the type of course that you're pursuing, for instance, as a postgraduate doctor or dentist, and a lot of different provisions are in the immigration rules if you are a student union sabbatical officer. So I do think it's important that you're aware of what you're able to do now. And I think that most people are aware about the prohibitions about self-employment, that as a student, you're not able to be self-employed. And I note that with the change in immigration rules, part of my slide that you can see in front of you talks about engaging in business activity if you're waiting for a decision on an application as starter. Now, this route has now closed. So later on in our presentation, we're going to be talking about other options that you could be interested in, such as Innovator Founder, which my colleague will touch on. But so for now, starting with your leave as a student, the place that you're up to at the moment, I think most of you are aware about what you can and cannot do. However, the immigration world moves quite quickly. So when you are submitting an in-time application, potentially as a graduate or as a skilled worker, those work conditions that you're subject to will change. And again, as this is immigration, the changes can come thick and fast from the government. So right now, for a graduate application, you'd be able to start working in employment once you have successfully completed your course. As a skilled worker, if you were changing from a student to skilled worker, again, right now, you can start working in a vacancy up to 3 months prior to your course completion date. But I think that maybe many of you will have picked up on some changes that have been publicized recently, particularly with that switch from student to skilled worker and when you could start working. So coming next year, the government have confirmed that potentially from January 2024, that time frame, that switch within the 3 months of completing your course may change. And so that all students would have to have successfully completed their studies before switching to skilled worker. But right now, that is not the rule. But that's a forthcoming change that I think everyone should be aware of. I think also, as I go through my slides just a bit further about the graduate route, we'll come across some changes that, again, you may have read about in the news. But that's what I want to start with today. I want to talk to you a little bit about the graduate route, and then my colleague, Mr. Haffajee, will discuss the skilled worker routes. And then I think towards the end of the presentation, once we've all spoken, there'll be the opportunity to ask some questions. So starting with the graduate route, it's still a fairly new visa route, only began in 2021. And to apply, you need to be an international student who successfully completed an eligible course of study. The conditions that you're permitted, the grant of leave that you get, will be able to stay in the UK for up to 2 years. It could be slightly longer if you're a PhD or another doctoral graduate. Again, within the news, there was talk from the government that this 2-year term would be reduced. At the moment, I haven't seen any further publications on that change. So for now, again, the grant of permission as a graduate will remain that up to 2 years. However, within this route, that is your limit. You cannot extend your visa after those 2 years. And it's important to note that time on the graduate route, this route itself doesn't lead to settlement. However, the time you spend could be accrued with other grants of leave that you may have had to get you to a long residence application. But it would depend on your specific circumstances if that is the fastest route for you to settle here in the UK. Now, with many immigration applications, you applying as a graduate would need to meet several validity, suitability, and eligibility requirements. And validity is really covering the practicalities, the logistics of making your application. So ensuring the simple things that you have used the correct form, that you've accessed the correct form online, that you've paid the correct fees. I've set the fees out on the slide in front of you again. It is possible that these may be updated next year. The Home Office tend to change any fee increases from April in the new year. But you can see that by Home Office standards, this type of application is fairly affordable. It does depend, I think, with when you're paying with your fee is £715 for the application, but your IHS, your immigration health surcharge, for 2 years, I've set that out, and for 3 years in case you are a PhD. The way that you then need to submit your biometric information, so your fingerprints and photo, does depend on whether you've used an app or you've physically gone to a UK VCAS appointment. Some of you may have been used to that type of experience, having attended a visa centre abroad, maybe when making an entry clearance application as a student to the UK. You're going to need to provide a standard supporting evidence to prove your nationality, to prove your identity. And it's important that you are in the UK when you submit your application for the graduate visa. And equally as important, you must have last held permission as a student. If you've left the UK and come back as a visitor, for instance, then you wouldn't be able to submit a valid application for the graduate visa. It does depend whether you also need to add evidence if you were granted a scholarship or a sponsorship, perhaps from a government for the past 12 months. Often the Home Office is thinking here is if somebody has paid for you to work in the UK as a student, then they want to know that they are supportive of your graduate application, that you are in line with the funding that you may have received. Typically, decisions are provided quite quickly, usually well within the 8 weeks of biometric enrolment, but you cannot pay to expedite the consideration from the Home Office. So typically they do come back fairly quickly, but there is no priority service for this type of application. You'll also need to meet the suitability requirements. So suitability is really about you as a person, your character and conduct here. So crucially, making sure that you have always abided by your immigration restrictions and conditions. So you don't want to be in breach of your immigration conditions or be on immigration bail. So one of the crucial points for suitability is to make sure that you are submitting that application, your graduate visa, prior to the expiry of your student leave. That would constitute an in-time application. If there have been any issues with your conduct, such as criminality, for instance, or any sort of deception with the Home Office, this could cause an issue. You could be refused into the general grounds. And then there are small things that you need to consider. If you have any sort of outstanding NHS debt, it is important that you are clearing that kind of fee, that kind of debt, because this is part of the suitability requirements and people can often miss that. So we just wanted to flag it on our slide to make sure that you're thinking in the round about whether you are meeting the suitability requirements. Moving on to the eligibility requirements, like a lot of applications with the Home Office, this is a points-based application. So the Home Office is going to be considering you under these 3 key areas and scoring points accordingly. The successful completion of your course of study, that the course of study meets the qualification requirement, and that you've studied in the UK requirements. So I'm going to delve into those in a little bit more detail, just to make sure that you are clear and understand about everything you need to do to make sure you have a successful application and meet those eligibility requirements. So the first one, perhaps one that we are asked about most, is successful course completion. So first of all, if you're at the University of Manchester, you're already studying with a sponsor who has the approved track record of compliance. So that's a positive. But then this wording about you must have successfully completed and studied your course during your last grant of permission to study. So successfully completed does mean that everything has been approved by your university. All exams, all modules have been taken, your dissertation as well. I know that can often be something that's considered later. Essentially, you want your university to be able to confidently confirm to the Home Office that you have definitely successfully completed all modules, all aspects of your course. At times, even again, small things can prevent a university doing this. So ensuring that all your university fees have been paid, for instance, is crucial to make sure that there's nothing that will stop your university saying that, yes, you have successfully completed your course. I'll move on to the qualification requirements again. Often, this is something that the majority of you will meet. Essentially, the Home Office are looking for the right level of study. So we're looking at a UK bachelor's degree, a postgraduate degree, and we've also taken the time on the slide to list the other type of maybe more vocational courses that people may be pursuing. I'll give you a moment to look at that. And again, there are slightly different provisions if you are acting as a student union sabbatical officer. Again, if there's anybody here today that has taken that role and you have any questions about your leave and about future applications, please do reach out to Latitude Law. I'll be happy to help. So essentially, if you are meeting your degree that you have studied definitely meets that qualification, that your points will be awarded, that box will be ticked. Moving on to the studying in the UK requirements, this was a little bit more complex during the pandemic. Essentially, if your course is less than is 12 months or less, then really you should have been in the UK studying for the whole duration of that course. If the length of your course was longer than 12 months, at least 12 months, you must have been studying in the UK. But obviously the pandemic disrupted a lot of courses of study, and this may still be applicable to some people who are attending today. So there are some provisions that the Home Office has built into their guidance to accommodate distance learning that may have taken. And that distance learning between the 24th of January 2020 to the 30th of June 2022. So the Home Office have tried to give some space and latitude to people to ensure they still meet that requirement if they were disrupted because of the pandemic and distance learning had to take place. So if you are successful, if you are granted leave as a graduate, so you've met all these 3 requirements, you'd be given 2 years leave to remain. And again, that was slightly longer if your qualification was as a PhD or some other form of doctoral qualification. And then there's a huge amount of freedom with the graduate route. So you'd be able to undertake employment, self-employment is viable on this route, perhaps voluntary work. Additionally, you could study as well if you chose to, but the Home Office wouldn't approve graduate visa if your study is something that you should be sponsored by a university to be doing that sort of course. But essentially, as a graduate visa holder, there is this huge amount of freedom, and it can give you time to establish yourself here in the UK. You'd be able to work for any company. They wouldn't have to hold a sponsor license. And that could give you the freedom to build connections and relationships that you need, maybe as you're considering your future or really what you want to do. I think it's important just to mention how you receive proof of your status. If when you were submitting your application, you use the IDV app, your status will be digital. If you physically went to a biometric centre, you will have a little biometric residence permit card that will show your status here as a graduate visa holder. But all new biometric residence cards will be issued with an expiry date of the 31st of December 2024, because this is the date that the permits themselves expire, not the expiry of your leave. So ultimately, from I assume the 1st of January 2025, the UK government is moving to a completely digital only system to evidence your immigration status. So my next slide, again, may be something that you have read in the news. So family members, right now with the graduate route, the idea remains that you are able to sponsor your dependents, but there has been announcements that this will be changing. Again, I assume there is no update at the moment to the immigration rules itself. But I think these changes are going to be coming in where that would be prohibited. So right now, I will leave this information on the slide for you to consider. It will focus, if anyone's interested in personal migration as well, if you have a partner here, a British partner that you are considering switching status to any sort of personal migration, the relationship requirements that I set out on the slide for a partner will be applicable to you, and it would be applicable right now for a dependent on the graduate route. So you must prove your relationship to the Home Office. Establishing that your relationship is genuine and subsisting could involve objective proof, such as a marriage certificate, and confirming that you intend to live together here in the UK. Your status as a dependent would be tied to the main applicant, so your leave would expire in line with them. Similarly, with dependent children, the Home Office are keen to focus on the fact that the age requirement is met, that essentially you must be under the age of 18 if you're talking about a dependent child. And if anybody is between the age of 16 to 18, they cannot be leading an independent life. As always, there are requirements to meet to ensure that that person will have suitable care and accommodation in the UK. But I'd like to switch to the benefits that I still see within the graduate route. As I mentioned before, there is a huge amount of freedom, a huge amount of latitude within the graduate route that gives you a chance to establish yourself here in the UK. Work is permitted at any skill level. Additionally, self-employment, if you wanted to try out a venture here in the UK. And as I said initially, whilst it's not a route to settlement, it is possible that it could apply to you, that time in this route, maybe 2 years in this route, could allow you to accrue more time towards a long residence settlement application. And additionally, you are able to switch from graduate to another route that provides a route to settlement, like skilled worker. As long as you're doing so in time, you're making that application before the expiry of your leave. Okay, that's the general overview for the graduate route. And I think we just wanted to touch on a few frequently asked questions that come up with the graduate route. So essentially we put 5 here on the slide for you. Can you submit before you receive your final results? So as I mentioned earlier, you want your university to confirm to the Home Office that you have successfully completed your course. And that would involve that you have done everything and that everything has been approved. So if you do not have all results in, it's very likely that your university won't be able to confidently say that. Again, as I mentioned, can you submit before you've paid all your course fees? Well, course completion involves final payments of those fees. So again, this could hold back your university from definitively confirming that, yes, you have successfully completed everything. So it's very important that you make sure all those boxes are ticked. With the last 3 questions, some of these things can be applicable and can cause real headaches for people, real worries. If your course changed, but the content is the same, that's fine. If not, again, I would seek advice to consider how you want to go forward. Again, if there was an issue when you didn't travel in the UK, you've not really met the study in the UK requirements. Essentially, if you've not studied in the UK at all, you're not going to be really likely to qualify for the graduate visa. That is a key part of the application. For any student union sabbatical officers out there, that person would be able to qualify for graduate leave if they've done 2 consecutive periods of leave as a sabbatical officer. I think it's always important to cover them, but again, if that is you, please do reach out to us if you have any questions. And briefly, I'm now just going to cover the documents that you should expect the Home Office want you to provide. So you're going to need evidence of your nationality and identity, so your passport, your biometric residence permit, and again, your evidence of completing your qualification. So if your university has issued you something that confirms that you successfully completed all of your course modules, I mean, often by way of email that I've seen before, this is going to be important evidence that should be uploaded, should be provided to the Home Office. If you're somebody that was sponsored or had a scholarship, again, a letter from that person confirming that they are happy for you to continue with your graduate visa application, that they, for instance, don't expect you, now that you finish your course, to come and work for them. And again, if we're focused on dependents, you'd need all the same sorts of evidence for family members, such as ID, confirmation about the relationship, birth certificates, marriage certificates, and evidence of living together in the UK. But okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mohammed, Mr. Mohammed Hafaji, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the skilled worker visa. But thank you so much for listening to me. And Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. That was very well explained. So I'm going to, as Victoria mentioned, I'm going to explain the skilled worker route. Now, firstly, nice to meet you all, by the way. In regards to the skilled worker route, it's essentially a sponsored work route for you to hopefully switch into following your completion of your course, or after graduate visa, or even during your graduate visa. It can be switched over anytime during your graduate visa. Now, the good thing about a skilled worker visa compared to a student visa or graduate visa is it is a route which leads to settlement in the UK. So after completion of 5 years in the UK as a skilled worker, you can apply for settlement, and that will also be the case for dependent family members as well. Now, there's similar to a graduate visa route and many other immigration routes, there are the main requirements, for example, the validity route, suitability and eligibility requirements, exactly more or less the same as what Victoria explained in regards to the validity and suitability requirements. Validity is usually the practicality side of things. So, for example, completing an online application, enrolling biometrics, or if you're doing it through the ID checkup, that would be fine, paying the relevant fees, etc. And suitability will be in regards to conduct. So hopefully there's no criminal convictions or adverse immigration issues, which could essentially, lead to refusal if they are. So in terms of the eligibility requirements, I'll mention that over the next few slides. Now, In regards to the eligibility requirements, again, it's a points-based system route. So in total, there are 70 points which needs to be satisfied in order to be successful in terms of a skilled worker visa application. Now, these 70 points are split then into two categories. The first set is 50 mandatory points, and the other is 20 tradable points. And just to give you a breakdown in regards to the 50 mandatory points, that breaks down into 20 points for sponsorship, 20 points for being offered a job at an appropriate skill level, and 10 points for English language. And again, I'll break these down a bit more further in the next slide. And then again, just going back to the previous one, the last 20 points would be in regards to tradable points, which is essentially in regards to salary. So in regards to the sponsorship side of things, again, similar to when you were all possibly offered a CAS as part of your student visa, it's not an actual physical certificate, it's more a digital certificate, which has all your, or which will have all details in regards to the employment itself. So it'll have your personal details, it'll have your job detail, job role, salary, number of hours you're likely to work, and all the key details which are required as part of the sponsorship. If this is, again, this can only be offered to you if you are offered employment by an employer who's got a sponsor license. If an employer hasn't got a sponsor license, in order for them to issue you with a certificate of sponsorship, they will have to apply and be successful. And once they're an approved sponsor, then they could create and assign a certificate of sponsorship for you. So once you do obtain your certificate of sponsorship, you'll have a unique reference number, and that unique reference number is what is used as part of your skilled worker visa application. The genuine offer of employment goes again with the job at an appropriate skill level. Firstly, if you are going to be offered a job, it has to be genuine employment. It can't just be to facilitate immigration. In terms of the actual job itself, to get the other 20 points, it has to be a job which is on a skill list which is set by the Home Office. So this list can be can be found by either clicking on the appendix skill occupations, or there are certain roles where there is essentially a shortage of occupations. These could be engineering roles, for example, medical roles, where they are updated every now and then, and sometimes some roles get taken out of the list, but they are benefits if they are on the shortage occupation list. So as long as the role that you're going to be offered is on the skill list, or it's on the shortage occupation list, then you will get the other additional 20 points. However, there are certain roles which would require an ATAS certificate. These are mainly to do with scientific engineering type roles and few others. So it is always worth bearing in mind or seeking advice in regards to whether your role that you're going to apply for would require an ATAS certificate. But like I said, majority of them and what's mentioned on our slide is in regards to scientific / engineering type roles. So they're the 40 so far from the 50. The other 10 points is in regards to English language requirement. Now, majority of you, I'm sure, as you're on a student visa, would have automatically obtained the relevant English language qualification, and that would be fine as part of the skilled worker visa because you've already proved that you passed it as part of your student visa. For the minimum requirement for a skilled worker visa is B1 level. However, if you want to further enhance this, by the time you complete your course, you could provide a degree certificate, which is a bachelor's degree or above, a master's or even a doctorate, which that can also be used as part of to meet the English language requirement. One other point, for example, we represent a lot of medical practitioners. For myself, I deal with a lot of the dental industry. So a lot of my dentistry clients are registered with the General Dental Council. So as part of the GDC registration, they would have had to show that they've already passed some sort of minimum English language requirement. So again, if you are regulated by a regulated profession like the GDC or the Medical General Council, and an English language requirement was used as part of the qualification, then again, that can be used as evidence to meet the English language requirement. So as long as you've got the 20 points for the sponsorship, 20 points for being offered a job at an approved skill level, and 10 points for English language, that will satisfy the mandatory 50 points from the 70. Okay, the next one will be in regards to tradable points. Okay, now this is in regards to salary side of things. Now, the starting point for all skilled worker visas is there has to be a starting salary of 26,200, and you have to be paid £10.75 per hour, or the going rate for the occupation role. So I'll give you an example in regards to that. Let's just say, for example, as a solicitor, the going rate on the skill list is £30,000 per year. Then you have to be paid the 30,000 instead of 26,200. 26,200 is the absolute baseline, or you have to be paid the going rate for the role, but at the same time, there has to be the minimum £10.75 hourly rate that has to be paid. However, there are certain discounts which are available. For example, if you're a new entrant, so if you're, for example, a student switching to the skilled worker route, or you're under the age of 26, you could benefit from a discounted salary. So instead of being paid 26,200, you can essentially be paid 20,960, or you could be paid a 70% of the actual going rate of the occupation code. So the 20,960 is in regards to new entrants and shortage occupation roles. The only difference in regards to the shortage occupation role, although the going rate is 20,960, the discounted rate, instead of 70%, which you're eligible for as a new entrant, so if you're switching from student to a skilled worker, is actually 80%. So there's still a discounted salary, but just slightly more than the actual new entrant. If you're studying or have a PhD qualification, and the job that you're going to do is in regards to your PhD qualification, again, the minimum salary requirement is 20,580 instead of the 26,200. You have to be paid a normal £10.75 per hour, and it's just, you could get a discounted rate of 90% of the going rate of the occupation code. There are other reductions too, but this all depends on the actual job role that you're going to apply for. For example, for medical practitioners, again, going back to my dental clients, they usually have a baseline salary starting of 20,960. And in terms of the hourly rate requirements, that is different. Even in terms of the actual going rates, they're more to do with NHS bandings compared to actual salaries which are mentioned on the skill list itself. So the next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the salary side of things, as I've covered, but on top, so it's just going back a bit, in regards to the actual points based, they are the 70 points that you'll need. So it'll be 20 points for certificate of sponsorship, 20 points for having the job on a skill list, 10 points for English language, and 20 points for tradable salary. So as long as you meet the 70 there, you'll meet the points-based system requirements. However, on top of that, there is additional financial requirements, again, which is very similar to most type of visas under the points-based system. However, if you have been in the UK for 12 months or more, this will automatically be met. If you've been in the UK for less than 12 months, or you're applying for entry clearance, then you will have to show that you've held £1,270 for at least 28 days prior to making the application. Or another way that can be satisfied is if your sponsor or sponsored to be certifies on the certificate of sponsorship that they will maintain you or certify your maintenance. Again, they don't necessarily have to give you the funds. They don't have to, and the period of time that they have to certify it for is at least the first 28 days of your visa. So if they tick the relevant box in your certificate of sponsorship, you can automatically meet their financial requirement. And if you do have dependents that are applying for you, there is additional money on top which is required. If they are already here in the UK, that could automatically be satisfied. If they've been here for less than 12 months or applying for entry clearance, then it's usually around £250 on top, equivalent for 28 days that they need to satisfy. There are certain roles within the skilled worker list which would require a criminal record certificate. Again, if you've been in the UK for more than 12 months, then that's usually exempt. However, if you are applying for entry clearance, and that's usually within the medical professions or any professions that you are going to be dealing with the public, they would require a criminal record certificate for any country that you've lived in for at least 12 months in the last 10 years period. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay. So in terms of if everything is all well, in terms of meeting the points and meeting the financial requirement and the application is successful, then it all depends on the actual sponsorship that you may have been offered in the first place, whether it was a 3-year sponsorship or a 5-year sponsorship, depending on what was mentioned on the certificate of sponsorship, and as part of your visa application, you'll be granted leave accordingly, whether it's 3 years or 5 years. If it is 3 years, you apply for a further extension, which will give you another 3 years. And once you've reached the 5-year mark, you can apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. If it is 5 years right from the outset, then as long as you continue with your employment, or even if you do change your employment, but you've hit the 5-year mark, then you could apply for settlement in the UK. So one of the conditions is there will be no access to public funds, and you could only work in regards to the permission of work can only be in regards to the work that you're going to be sponsored for. There are usually some exemptions when it comes to not being able to work as a sports person for dependents or doctors or dentists, for example. So that will usually be a condition on family members' BRP cards. So it's something to consider as well. Supplementary employment is permitted as long as the job that you're going to do is no more than 20 hours on top of your normal skilled worker sponsorship. And also it has to either be within the same SOC code profession. SOC code is, just by the way, in terms of when there's a list for all skilled worker jobs, they have a unique 4-digit reference SOC code, which is used as part of your visa application process and the sponsorship. So as long as it falls within that relevant SOC code, or it's a shortage occupation role and it's no more than 20 hours per week, then supplementary employment is permitted. Anything more than that, and you'll be breaching your employment conditions. Again, voluntary work is permitted, and you can study as well at the same time, as long as it doesn't interfere with your actual main permanent role that you're being sponsored for. And as I've explained before, it's a 5-year route to settlement route. The types of documents that you require for a skilled worker visa, again, there's not many compared to some other visa routes. For example, they're just core main documents that they require. So it'll be a valid passport, which has to be valid at the time of application, your BRP, the certificate of sponsorship. And in terms, the certificate of sponsorship will explain how you meet the tradable requirements that will all be mentioned at the time when the certificate of sponsorship is created. If there is a requirement for financial documents, for example, if you have to show the 1,270, then the bank statements for the 28-day period will have to be satisfied. There's the English language requirement documents which have to be provided. So for example, whether it's your IELTS certificate, which you use as part of your entry clearance application, or a degree certificate, if the degree was conducted in another country and it was conducted in English, you can get UK ECTIS to confirm that it was an equivalent to a BA level or above degree, which would have been taught here in the UK. As I've explained, there may be certain roles which require criminal record certificate, again, usually to do with industries that when you're dealing with the public or medical industries, very common to have a requirement for a criminal record certificate. And if there is any scholarships or sponsorships, letters of consent to confirm, to be provided as part of the application. If you do have any dependents, for example, whether spouses or long-term partners for more than 2 years, or children under the age of 18, then again, in terms of their documents, it'll have to be their identity documents, so passports, their BRPs. The proof of relationship will include a marriage certificate or birth certificate, and also cohabitation evidence to show that you have been living together as a family unit. If you have been married, then we usually advise within 12 to 24 months of cohabitation. If you have any children, letters from their schools or a GP to show they've been living at the same address, because they're very unlikely to have utility bills, for example, in their names. If you have been, if you're unmarried partners, then it has to be a minimum of 2 years of cohabitation evidence to show that you live together for that period as durable partners. Okay. If for any reason after your studies or your graduate visa, there's no other options, for whatever reason you struggle to find a sponsorship, or there is no sponsorship offer available, then there are certain other routes that could be possible for you. One of the most straightforward ones is, for example, if you're in a relationship with a British or a settled person here in the UK, then you can essentially switch into a partner type relationship. Or if somebody is on a skilled worker visa and you're in a relationship, or you're the partner, then you can switch to become a dependent of that person. There's a new route essentially, which is called the innovator founder route, which kind of replaced the innovator route. The good thing about innovator founder route is there's no investment funds required of, for example, 50,000, which was a requirement for innovator route. The only one of the difficulties, however, with this visa is that it would require an endorsement from a endorsing UKVI body. Now, there used to be a whole list of endorsement bodies in regards to the innovator and startup visa, but this has now narrowed down to only 4 endorsement bodies, and they'll want to see that the business is quite innovative, so something new to the UK market is viable, so you've got your relevant experiences and you could provide a good business plan, and it's also scalable, so they'll want to see how the business can enhance over the next 3 to 5 years, or for future in regards to helping the UK economy. And your business plan that you'll have to provide as part of the endorsement process will have to show all the evidence in regards to that. So you'll have to have a very thorough knowledge of your business and what you intend to do. Another very popular visa is known as a global talent visa. These can be broken down into various categories. It could be in the arts category, in regards to tech, in regards to architecture, research. So it all depends on your industry and what you may have a exceptional talent or promise on. The difference between exceptional talent and exceptional promise is exceptional talent is for more experienced persons in their field of industry. So if they've been working in the industry for at least 5 years, then you could apply for the exceptional talent route, where you can essentially get settlement after 3 years in the UK. Then that's similar to the innovator founder route as well. I think they're the only 2 routes that you could get settlement after 3 years, whereas most other routes is 5 years. And if you wish to apply under exceptional promise, that's again for more newcomers to their industry. So again, just to give you an example of one of my clients, she was a young upcoming actress, for example. She's performed in films and theatre. So the fact that she was only the age of 21, her experience is only less than a few years or less than 5 years. So she applied under exceptional promise. Now, if you do get the global talent visa under exceptional promise, you can't apply for settlement after 3 years, but you can apply after 5 years. So it is a route to settlement. It's an unsponsored route. So it is a very appealing route to anyone that may be able to satisfy under that category. So that's in regards to the additional routes. And if there is a next slide. And lastly, is in regards to how both myself and Victoria and our colleagues at Latitude Law can help you with any visa queries. We do offer free 30-minute consultations to all potential new clients, and we'll be more than happy to have consultations with all of you in attendance. So all you've got to do is just email the address which is on the slide there, and I'm sure the university will be able to provide it to you as well. We have slots available on a daily basis, either between 10 till 12 or 2 till 4, and one of our colleagues, including ourselves, will be able to help you. If you do instruct us, we could assist you during the whole application process. So starting off from giving you detailed advice with a follow-up with a detailed advice letter. We provide a document checklist, and we do the whole process for you in terms of completing an online application, uploading all your supporting documents, whether it's through the ID Check app or the UK VCAS or even entry clearance, third-party partner providers like TLS or VFS Global. And one of the main things that we do as part of our legal service is preparing and providing a very detailed letter of representations. So a letter of representation clearly explains how you meet all the requirements of the immigration rules. So based on that, there should be no reason for the Home Office to refuse the applications, as long as you meet all the rules and everything is very clearly explained and documented as well. So I believe I've gone through everything. Hopefully that was very clear. And if you do have any questions, Victoria and I would be more than happy to help.
What we'll actually do, Mohammed, if that's okay, we're just going to pass it over just to Marin, who's our Manchester Graduate Talent intern, and also an international alumni from the University of Manchester. So just before we do take questions, Marin's just going to give their perspective of their experience of visas of immigration, and then we'll circle back to questions in just a moment. So over to you, Marin. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to keep this brief so we can get to all of your questions. I've been seeing in the chat. We will try to cover as many of them as possible. So I will just talk a bit about my experience on the graduate visa. Can I get next slide? Wonderful. So I'll keep this short because everyone's experience will be different. It is a very individual thing, but this is just what I went through, and it in the end was successful. So that should be some peace of mind. So I had initially applied for a skilled worker visa straight out of graduation. And there was an error with the application, and I was notified I could fix it and submit a new one. So that was fine. I submitted a new one. But the job I did have had sponsored me. There were some dishonesty issues with the employer, and I ultimately did have to withdraw the skilled worker visa application. Fortunately, my student visa was still valid because I had never been approved for the skilled worker visa. So I was able to apply then for the graduate visa and leave that job so that I wasn't in violation of any working rules. And then ultimately I did get accepted on the graduate visa, and now I'm working at the university. Next slide. So my tips for visas in general is do your research early, which you're all doing by being here today, because you need to know all the options available to you. So if you run into an issue, which you might, because this is a complicated process, you know what your next step is. So for instance, if I had no idea about the graduate visa during my whole skilled worker trauma, I wouldn't have known what to do next. So it's important to just know everything early, even if you think it might not apply to you, it might in the future. Utilize all your resources, latitude law, free consultations with other immigration advisors, get as many opinions as you want. Something I didn't know prior to all of this is that you can contact your local MP. And for most of you, if you are residing in Manchester, that will be one of our 3 Manchester MPs, and they're all lovely. I've spoken to all of them because I wasn't clear on which one mine was, but they were all lovely, and they were able to reach out to the Home Office for me and explain that whole situation. So similar to a letter from a law office, they can be your advocate. And that also gave me some peace of mind that things were going to go smoothly. You can also submit a letter to the Home Office. I wanted to expedite my grad visa, and obviously that's not possible, but you can technically write a letter explaining if you had some extenuating circumstance. For instance, a medical procedure you had to be back for, because you cannot leave the country while your application is in progress. So that was my situation. So I did submit a letter. Thankfully, it came back in time. Not sure if it had anything to do with the letter, but that was just my experience there. So as you can see, the process it's not a straight line, and it's not entirely black and white. If you make a mistake, it's not game over. And what helped was doing research and using everyone I could find to ask for help. Next slide, I think. Yes. So, yeah, in my experience, I received my decision in 8 weeks. The estimated time was 12 weeks. I applied in October of last year, and I guess that was quite a busy time because that is around when most student visas expire. So there is a big influx to the Home Office. But thankfully, it did come back within 8 weeks. And if you apply outside of that time, I assume it will be faster. Some application tips. It's not a challenging application, but it can be long and tedious. You have to notate every day you leave/arrive to the United Kingdom for the last 5 years. So for me, I found that the most difficult part of the application, purely because it takes a long time and you have to look back at all of your travel records. But as long as you have all of that ready to go and you go through it very meticulously, it will be fine. It's not a challenging application in the sense that it's asking you questions you won't know the answer to. It is very logistical. And as Latitude Law explained, all of you, if you've studied a course in the UK and you're residing in the UK, it should be fine. I will end there because I want to get to all of your, I have another slide. I do want to get to all of your questions. We've had problems in the past of not being able to answer all of them. But I'll talk briefly about my experience finding work. Some employers aren't yet aware of the graduate visa route. Fortunately, the university is very aware of it. They're wonderful, so I would recommend looking at the university if you want. But it is unfortunately still on the onus of you to explain this route to many employers, and just make sure that they're very clear that they don't need to pay any extra fees to sponsor you, because they don't need to sponsor you. You can work just as any other UK citizen can work for up to 2 years. So as long as you do your research again and understand your rights as a foreign worker, understand what you don't have to disclose at the job application stage of the recruitment process. You don't need to tell them your whole immigration story. You don't need to tell them your whole immigration story at that stage. All they need to know is that you don't need sponsorship, and that's it. All right, I will now end there, and we will move over to the chat. So I'm going to, a lot of you have already put questions in, so keep them coming. I'm just going to start at the top and read them out loud, and myself and Latitude Law will hopefully be able to answer them. Do I need to apply for the graduate visa before the expiry of student visa? Yes. And then second part of the question, can I apply from outside the UK after expired student visa? No, unfortunately, you cannot. It does need to be in the UK and before your student visa expires. This is another question about when to apply for the grad visa. Two scenarios: if I get an offer before my student visa expires, or if they don't get an offer before the student visa expires. So with the grad visa, you don't necessarily need a job offer to apply for the visa. That is the good thing about it. You don't need to have a job. It's not tied to a job. So you can apply, as long as you apply before the student visa expires, then you're good. I obtained a graduate visa in 2021. However, last year I switched to a student visa to progress with my master's. Would I be able to get a refund for the visa fees that were within the same period? Example, the immigration health surcharge.
Mohammed, what do you think about this? And I think that if you are currently a student, it might be possible to get a partial refund for the immigration health surcharge, but I do think that depends on whether you have a European health insurance card and you're not working. I do think it can possibly be an option if you want to try get a refund for the immigration health surcharge. I don't think you'd be eligible for a refund for the visa application fees, unless Mohammed, you disagree.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, Mohammed. Yes, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I put myself on mute there. As I was saying, I agree with you, Victoria. I mean, there's a possibility that you could get a partial refund on the IHS, but in regards to the actual visa application, I very much doubt now.
To apply, it's an online application, I believe. But again, it depends if you're an EU or Swiss student. It depends on when your EHIC was issued, or an S1 certificate. So I think that could be quite complex. But I think if you were looking online, you'd be applying for a refund for the immigration health surcharge. But yeah, sorry, I can see there's a lot of questions, but yeah, that's our thoughts on that, I guess. I think the next question is maybe my explanation. If you're on a university scholarship and they can't offer a consent letter to the application for graduates, so the immigration rules reference for their eligibility, if you've been awarded a scholarship or sponsorship by government or international scholarship agency. So that's where that's important, to get consent from a government or international scholarship agency. I can't envisage that university scholarship just to help you with your fees. They'd need to consent to your subsequent visa application as a graduate. So the immigration rules talk about, you know, international scholarship agency or government agency. They're the ones who would have to provide written consent from that government or agency. Sorry, I just jumped in there.
No worries.
My lack of clarity.
I was just going to say about the refund. I got a refund on that application that I had made an error on, and they only refunded the part of the application fee, because that was the circumstance of, oh, you made a mistake and we're going to refund part of that, but it still wasn't all of it, unfortunately. They do refund all of the health surcharge, because that's just dependent on how long you're using the NHS, basically. They did take quite a long time in refunding me, but I had contacted my MP about that as well, and he was able to kind of nudge them. So you could perhaps go down that route as well. Next question. We can work full-time on our student visa post completion of the course. Yeah, because that's outside of term time. The completion is the date. The completion is the date. Oh, the date of course completion mentioned on the CAS. Is it the end of September, or is it as soon as we submit the dissertation? Are we eligible?
I mean, my take on that would be in regards to once the actual final dissertation has been handed in.
Yeah.
I mean, and based on that, then yes, you can work full time. I mean, it is a bit of a grey area sometimes. For example, when it's coming to the end of a student visa, and let's just say, for example, you've got 2 months remaining. Yes, you could work full time until, because it's classed as being out of term time. But some employers do find a bit wary in regards to this, because the rules are a bit grey in regards to what the long-term intentions are, if there's going to be sponsorship as a result of it, or will that be classed as now not studying anymore. So if it is going to lead to sponsorship or leading to an exchange in a graduate visa, then yes, full-time employment will be fine. Then again, a flip side to it is, yes, you can work, but there may just be some sort of employers may just be a bit more wary in regards to allowing full-time employment once the studies are completely over and there's no intention to then offer a sponsorship, for example.
Hang on, I've just got someone from my team at the university who just sent me, this is covered on the Uni Visas team website, so you can check that out. I will get somebody to pop the link into the chat. Yeah, so hang on. All right, next question. We will get that link for you. Apparently we do cover this. Does visa sponsorship by company mean only the sponsor certificate for the application, or does it also mean that they will cover the fee and the NHS charge? Usually no.
Yeah, it all depends on the company. Some companies decide to, pay for all visa fees, including NHS fees as well. There are 2 mandatory fees that the company has to pay. That's the certificate of sponsorship fee, and also what is known as a skills charge fee. So a skills charge is an additional fee or that the Home Office charge for certain situations. It is exempt if you're a student switching to a skilled worker visa, but if it is involved, then the employer has to pay that and cannot be recouped from the employee themselves. In regards to other fees, whether it's the visa fees or NHS fees, that's usually an agreement between employer and employee, who pays them. But this certificate of sponsorship fee of £199 plus the skills charge, if it is applicable, has to be paid by the employer.
For the graduate visa, this is the start date of the 2 years when the visa is submitted, when the application is submitted, or when it's granted. It's from when it's granted. So that is good. You won't get stuck into, if it takes a really long time, that's not eating into your 2 years. However, this might be tempting, but I wouldn't recommend applying on the very last day of your student visa, because you could run into issues simply with the website or the app. And you wouldn't want to be on the last day of your student visa and then have that happen. So I know that might be tempting to wait as long as possible to extend the 2 years, but I wouldn't advise that because the app can crash sometimes. It does. So if you reach the 5 years on a skilled worker visa and do not want to apply for UK settlement, in the case of some countries not allowing joint citizenship, could you continue to work in the UK on the skilled worker visa indefinitely?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, do you want to answer that, Victoria?
Yeah, I think we've got a little bit of confusion about settlement versus citizenship. So settlement, indefinite leave to remain, and settlement is just an application that confirms you are now free from immigration restrictions. So you do not have to apply after settlement for citizenship. You do not have to continue to make a naturalization application, exactly for the reason that Holly has set out, because obviously you may not want to jeopardize your nationality with another country. You may not want to lose that citizenship. But if you have, so once you get indefinite leave to remain, a settlement, then you're free from immigration restriction. You can come and go as you please from the UK, but if you are out of the UK for 2 years consecutively, you can lose that status, despite its name, despite being called settlement or indefinite leave. It is not indefinite. It can be lost if you then leave the UK for that 2 years. That's important. But so here, if you had settlement, you'd be able to just continue working. You wouldn't need to then make another application for citizenship if you didn't want to.
I'll just jump in there, just say thank you so much, Victoria, Mohammed and Marin. I know we've not had a chance to cover all of those questions. I'm just conscious that we're already past our 1 hour slot in terms of the session, but it's been so useful. So thank you so much for all the advice and for giving your time, particularly Victoria and Mohammed. We really do appreciate it. Apologies to anyone in the chat whose question we've not got to yet, but please do access the Careers Service website, access the international section, which has links to various visa pages and things, so you can get that information. It has links obviously to Latitude Law's contact information as well for those complex queries. So there is chance to still to get those answers to your questions as well beyond today. What we did just want to do very quickly, just for the remainder of the session, and I do appreciate for a lot of you that, as I say, you perhaps were just expecting to stay for the hour, I'm going to give you a very quick rundown of the support that we can provide you as an international student, both now and for up to 2 years after you graduate. Now, I know, Victoria, Mohammed, I know you're busy people, so don't feel that you have to stay and listen to this part out of politeness. You're very welcome to be released. At the same time, to our students as well, if you do need to get somewhere, again, we won't be offended if you do have to get off, but at the same time, I was just going to spend 5 minutes just giving you an overview of hopefully some helpful resources. So as I mentioned before, it's really important to stress that the Careers Service isn't just here to support you just as an international student now while you're at the university. It is for up to 2 years after you graduate as well. And Career Connect is a really good starting point in terms of all that support. Now, those of you on the call, you'll be aware of Career Connect already because that's where you would have registered for this session. So you know a lot about it already, but just as a very quick overview, on that search drop down there in the top left of the screen, there you will find our vacancies board. And there, and last time I looked last week, there were almost 1,000 full-time roles in that vacancy section. You can filter by sector, you can filter by location in terms of where you wanted to work, and also you can filter by languages required as well. So as an international student, you've got that advantage over many of our home students. You've got at least 2 languages under your belt. So looking at the filtering by jobs which may have that additional language that you have may give you a bit of a step up on some of our home students in terms of the recruitment process. Very quickly to mention as well, if you're going to be in Manchester next year, you can also filter by what's called UOM schemes on the vacancies board, and you can find out about the Manchester Graduate Talent Programme. So our 12-month paid graduate placements in different areas across the university and in organisations in the Greater Manchester area, and you could be doing what Marin is doing right now. Okay, so do check out that variety of roles. It's a brilliant way under the graduate visa to build up your experience within the UK. As well, under the search drop down, you can look at our events calendar to find out more events just like this one and our skills workshops. And then just moving on to the book drop down as well, we've got our appointments. So if there is anything you're worried about relating to careers, if there's anything you want to talk about, please do book an appointment with us to have a chat. Okay, we'd be really happy to speak to you. We also, under that book drop down, we have interview simulations as well. These are a brilliant chance to boost your English language confidence by having a mock interview in a safe space with one of our careers consultants, getting used to answering interview questions in English, talking about yourself in English, talking about commercial issues, so that you can just get used to the standard of English required when it comes along to the real thing. So I'd really recommend those as an international student. Now, speaking of boosting English language confidence as well, we have got our pathways. So there are online learning modules that are hosted on Career Connect. There's the purple round pathways button that you can press. And there's a whole range of pathways which are themed by different areas of employability issues and the recruitment process as well. So we've got the Get Interview Ready pathway, for example, which not only incorporates our interview simulations, but it also will talk to you about Shortlist Me, which is a video interview platform. So you can practice video interview questions, and also there are specific video interviews tailored to particular major employers as well. So again, fantastic way of getting ahead of the game and boosting your confidence ahead of video interviews. The Get CV Ready pathway as well includes CareerSet. That's our AI CV checker. So you can upload your CV and CareerSet will give you tips and advice to make sure that it is formatted correctly for the UK job market. Once you've used CareerSet and you've reached a certain score, you can submit the CV as many times as you like. You can then book a CV review appointment with one of my colleagues. So they, again, can give you bespoke feedback on your CV before you send it off. The applications and cover letters pathway, again, that will give you advice on your applications, your cover letters, and help you to articulate your skills and experience clearly for employers. And then finally, the Get Ready International pathway. You will have noticed that we're very relevant to lots of you in the room right now. Now, we're revamping that, I should say, over the summer, but there's one particular key resource that I wanted to mention to you, which is very pertinent considering the subject of today's session. And that's eCareers Grad. So if you go into the pathway and then go down to the How to Find UK Employers Who Will Sponsor Skilled Worker Visas section, eCareers Grad is a tool which includes a database of major UK employers and their records for sponsoring people under the skilled worker visa. So really, really useful information. You can search within that tool by sector to focus in on companies of interest to you. So you can see on screen there, there's a real wide range of sectors for you to have a look at. And then you can drill down into the data and look at the numbers of skilled worker visas issued by those companies in recent years. There's also some other great tools on eCareers Grad. There are tips for dealing with exercises that might come up in recruitment processes for consultancy firms. And there are interview tips and case studies from international graduates who have successfully secured roles in the UK as well. Now, just a few more things I wanted to mention right at the end of these slides. I'm going to bring the QR code back up so you can register for this session, so you can get all of that brilliant information that Victoria, Mohammed and Maren gave you earlier. You can get access to those slides. But in the meantime, if you do get a chance to scan the QR code that's currently on screen, just to give us feedback on this session, we would really, really appreciate it. The more feedback we get from yourselves, the more we can make sure that the content that we're putting out there is relevant to your needs. So your feedback is so important. So please do scan that QR code, either now if you get a chance or when those slides come out to you over the next few days. Just focusing in on the rest of Future Fortnight. Now, we have lots more events coming up over the next week and a half or so. So, for example, there are sessions on where recruiters are going to give their tips for job hunting, and there's going to be vital information on UK recruitment processes within that session. We've got our Manchester Graduate Talent panel, so you can hear what it's like to be a Manchester Graduate Talent intern, just like Maren. We've got our Getting Interview Ready session as well. And again, as I've touched on before, that's so important to get as much information about the interview process as possible to gain that confidence beforehand, so you can be the best candidate that you can be. We've also, our full program of Future Fortnight events is available via the QR code or the bit.ly link that's just on screen there. They are mostly online like this one, but we do have some in-person drop-ins as well. So if you want to get CV advice and careers guidance, scan the QR code, see where those drop-ins are, and come along, and our team will be really happy to help you. Very quickly as well, now I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. You can continue to use the career service for up to 2 years after you finish your course, and you can access pretty much everything you could as a student. Keep using your Career Connect account as you are doing now with your student login details. It will stop working over the next few weeks or so, but then you will get a prompt to tell you that it stopped working, and then you can register for a graduate account. You can't register for that graduate account until your student details do stop working, but you'll be able to move over to that graduate account as soon as they do, and then you can just carry on using our services as a graduate. There's also our graduate careers network as well. That's on LinkedIn, and this is for all final year students and recent graduates. It allows you to connect with each other, build your network, find out about opportunities, events and vacancies, and keep in touch with the University of Manchester as well. So I would really recommend do that so you can cast your net as widely as possible when it comes to opportunities. And then finally, just one more question, a couple more slides just to say, please do stay connected with us. We've got a range of social media channels that will allow you to stay up to date with opportunities, with events, with support as well. So we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, so do follow us if you can. And finally, just in terms of where you're going to go next. So 15 months after you finish your course, you will be contacted and asked to complete the Graduate Outcomes Survey. Now, this is the largest annual social survey in the UK. It only takes about 10 minutes to complete, but please do keep an eye out for it because it's so important. It's your chance to give your feedback on your course, and it helps so many people, policymakers in government, to make decisions about higher education. It helps for universities to improve their courses, and it helps us as a career service to tailor and adapt our support to your needs. You will receive an email closer to the time, so please just make sure that your email details that you hold with the university are kept up to date. So thank you so much for those of you who've hung on and just listened to that last extra bit of support that we have for you. I hope you found that useful. I'll stop sharing the slides just a moment, but then I will put the first registration slide back on screen and just leave it there for a minute or so. Just those of you who've not completed registration for this event yet, you can scan the QR code so we can get those slides out to you over the next few days or so. But otherwise, again, a massive thank you to Victoria and Mohammed from Latitude Law. Thank you again for Marin for your contributions as well. And thank you to all of you for coming along today. I hope you found this session really useful. Take care, everybody. And just for the next minute or so, just for those of us who are still remaining, I've just popped the registration slide on screen now, so you can scan that QR code. You can or put the bit.ly link into your browser, and then just put the event title, visas, speakers down as Latitude Law, and you can make sure that you get the slides from today's session. Okay, so I'll just give our students who are left and graduates who are left in the room just a minute or so just to do that, and then we'll finish off the session. Thanks so much, everybody. So hopefully that's given you time to use that QR code there. So what we're going to end the session now. But again, as I mentioned before, any queries you've got about careers and employability, do get in touch with us at the Careers Service via all of those links that I provided beforehand. And we'd be really, really happy to support you. Have a lovely day, everyone, and take care.